Okay, we're live. So,
Uh,
first of all, can I just ask you to introduce yourself?
sure thing. My name is Montague T. Magruder. I am um, running for the Virginia House of Delegates in the 69th District, which includes most of south side of Richmond and one part of Chesterfield County, and as well as a few parts of Richmond City that's north of the river. I am running as the Green Party candidate, obviously, and I've been active in politics since 2010, and I ran for Richmond City Council in 2016, got 13% of the vote, and I'm running this year for a second time because of the fact that the issues that I wanted to address at what City Council required that I run for a state office because it requires state level intervention. And so that's why I'm running in this race now.
Okay. So you have some experience running. So I want to touch
Yes.
first, and by the way, that's the 69th district in Virginia for people who don't know.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
basically for what's known as our General Assembly, which is like our state legislature. It's called the General Assembly. The House of Delegates is the lower chamber of the General Assembly, and then you have the upper chamber, which is known as the Senate.
And then I think you guys have 100 delegates. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100 delegates. Yeah, 100 delegates, 40 senators.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So I first heard about you because of the Charlottesville protests. Um,
Yes.
Can I ask you, during those protests, you were there, I assume, representing the Green Party, and what was the Green Party's mission at those protests?
Well, it was mainly to be there to show solidarity with all the other organizations that were there. Like you had the Industrial Workers of the World there, you had the Democratic Socialists of America there. You also had organizations like Black Lives Matter, like Standing Up for Racial Justice. You had like there were a couple of candidates running for Congress next year. They were also in attendance, but I was basically the only candidate running for the House of Delegates that was there in Charlottesville, and I was not only there, as a Green, representing the Green Party. I was also there, like I said, to be in solidarity with the people. And Charlottesville is where I was born. That was my birthplace. I have family roots in Charlottesville, so I wanted to be there to make sure that that my place didn't become a flashpoint for white supremacist hatred to brew and fester itself throughout the state, and kind of drive out the white supremacists who were trying to bully Charlottesville City Council and withdrawing their decision to removing the Confederate statues. And there, for the record, there has been a court case that was recently decided on this that said that the city of Charlottesville does not have the authority to remove war monuments, but the people who support the statues have I would say about 15 to 20 days from now to come up with an argument that supports that the statues are war monuments, which the state protects, and not artwork. And for the record, the statues, the locations of the statues, they were originally parts of black neighborhoods. Small county back in the past seized land from those black neighborhoods to build the statues on.
So the statues basically are put there to kind of intimidate or just kind of like show the history of America that was obviously against the black people in those neighborhoods.
Well, I mean, you have to look at how the statues were put up like 40 years at least, like 40 years after the end of the Civil War and after Reconstruction. So the statues were basically put up there, put up as a giant middle finger to the Reconstruction era, to the advancement of civil rights for Black Americans. And we also have some of the same statues here in Richmond, along with we call what is known as Monument Avenue, which were put up around the same time, for the same reasons, basically.
Yes. So, hey, during the protests, can you tell us about the numbers between the actual protesters and the counter protesters? In other words, who showed up?
Well, I would simply, like I said, I would estimate there were like thousands of people, if not, or hundreds, if not thousands of people, that were joining the counter protests. Like I said, you had various organizations there, and they were not just there from, from local worlds. Like there were, like you had people from Richmond, like myself, that came down there, people from all over, in some cases all over the country, and joined in solidarity with the counter protesters. Now, in terms of the protesters themselves, I would say there was maybe 50 to 100 people, and I'm only saying that because, I wasn't there to be able to count them, and I wasn't really concerned about them. As far as I'm concerned, I just wanted to make sure that the lesson was learned, the lesson of the day was learned, that these white supremacists will not be allowed to come into Charlottesville or anywhere else in Virginia and be able to bully their way into making demands. Everybody else is told, go through the process, go through the system. So that's what these people are going to have to do. And that's the lesson we wanted to learn. We wanted to teach them.
So I'm glad to hear that they were hugely outnumbered. That's kind of heartening to me. So what's the demographics there in Charlottesville? Did they show? Is that a predominantly minority area, and is that why they showed up in that area, or is it the other way around?
No, Charlottesville is mostly white, Charlottesville is mostly white, but it's been changing. It's become progressive over the years. But there are still pockets of racism and old money or what have you. So those attitudes are still there. But there are, like I said, there are pockets of minority areas. Like one of the areas that the alt-right was trying to target was area of public housing, which was a minority majority community. It was mostly Black people there. So, we went to that public housing area to act as a protection, to protect them against the alt-right from being trying to ruckus in the public housing community, because they were trying to come there and intentionally start a race riot. But the community, the public housing residents, was like, you know what, we got this. You don't need to worry about us. We can handle ourselves. So we backed up. We went ahead and marched our way back into downtown Charlottesville. We got on Water Street. We joined with another march of counter protesters, and it was a beautiful show of solidarity. People were crossing over Water Street to get over to. We're walking up 4th Street, crossing over Water Street because we were heading back to Emancipation Park, and that's when the terrorist attack happened. Like I was not there to see the impact because I was across the street from the impact. But what I heard was a loud bang, and then I saw some smoke go up in the air, which I could tell was tear gas because of the way it smelled.
Yeah. So when you say that, you're talking about the Heather Heyer incident?
Huh?
Or you're talking about Heather Heyer killing?
Yeah, the terrorist attack basically, and like there was when the person backed up, when the suspect backed up, like there were street medics that were trying to tend to the injured people.
Yes.
Police and EMS didn't get there for about 15 to 20 minutes, Then once they finally show up, they start yanking off the Antifa street medics, which I thought was deplorable. But there was video footage that surfaced of the person who committed the attack being able to pull out completely all the way up to Market Street and being able to drive away without police intervention.
Right. So you felt the police were on the protester side in general?
Yeah, you could. That's what you could basically say that. That's like I said, given how the police acted, you could tell that they were not looking out for the counter protesters, despite the fact that both the counter protesters and the protesters themselves had permits and were entitled to police protection. It's obvious who they decided to protect anyway.
Right.
So that's why people say cops and the Klan go hand in hand. That's why people are quick to say fuck the police. It's a reason for people saying that, because when they look at who the police decides to protect over and over again, how we've seen in Charlottesville, how we've seen in Standing Rock and Occupy Wall Street, with all the civil rights movements in the past, you see that the police continuously act against the people's interests, and that's what leads folks to distrust police and be willing to give them a middle finger. That's when I see, comes to the left, when it comes to the progressives, the radicals, what have you, we are all we have.
And I think even more so, they protect the money interests.
Yeah, and the funny thing is you look at who is backing this alt-right movement, and you see that there are some wealthy millionaires that are clearly involved in the financing of people like Richard Spencer. So so that's the kind of stuff that you have going on.
Right.
Like that's a well-funded machine.
Yes. So let's talk about how are the people that in political office? What's the demographic of those people? Is there high minority representation, like some of the communities that are there in Virginia?
If you're talking about like in the General Assembly, the makeup of the General Assembly is overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male, and definitely, and the majority of them are over 55 years old. And so there aren't many black people or Latinos or Asians that are, or Native Americans that are in the House of Delegates or the state Senate. The majority of all of our governors, attorneys generals, and lieutenant governors have been white. The exception has only been when L. Douglas Wilder became lieutenant governor back in the 80s, and then I believe around 1990-92 became governor, the first African American governor. So, yeah, our government it does not represent the changing demographics of Virginia, because it's becoming a lot more diverse than representation that's in our General Assembly today.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this. Let's talk about the 69th district now.
Sure.
The demographics there are largely minority.
58% black, 11% Latino. Yes. Yeah, about 58% black, about 11% Latino, and 30% white. So it's a minority-majority district. It is a district that has been called into question by the Bethune-Hill court case, which asserts that the district, and along with 10 other districts, have been gerrymandered in such a way to pack black voters into certain districts, and then protect the Republican Party because of the fact that black voters have been packed into other districts. The power of the black vote has been diluted by that packing. Now, the sad part about it is the maps that are currently in place. The state's Black Caucus supported those maps. Not only that, the Democrats supported those maps. In the House of Delegates, in 2011 when they voted for the maps, the vote was 95-0. So Democrats and Republicans voted in favor of the very maps that are currently in use and have gerrymandered and diluted the power of black voters in order to help uphold white supremacy and protect incumbents from direct critical challenges in their districts.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this: what about do minority voters show up to the polls there in general, or is there less representation by minority voters?
Well, you have one of the things that I've noticed while going down to canvass is that there are a lot of minority voters that either they cannot vote because they've been convicted of a felony, and Virginia has lifetime felon disenfranchisement, where if you've been convicted of a felony offense, you cannot vote, you cannot serve on a jury, you cannot own firearms unless the governor reinstates your rights. And one of the things I've noticed as well is that the Democrats have actually counted on people aware of the elections. Like I've even went to one of the wealthiest areas of the district, what's known as Westover Hills. A lot of high income earners, they're either friends with the Democrat incumbent, or they don't even know about the race that's happening, or don't care because they are well off to do. But when it comes to the minority voters, the black voters, the Latino voters, they're not aware of the race. They can't vote in the race because, like I said, they're convicted felons and they don't have their rights restored, or because they may have mobility impairments, and and like I said, they may not care because they continuously see how the people that they have elected into power continue to screw them over after those politicians that came to them and talked a good game, but then when they got elected, they didn't do anything to help them specifically, or didn't make any effort to address their concerns, and in fact, they've even voted on legislation that's made things worse for them. For example, this year the General Assembly voted to pass House Bill 2291, which gives the energy monopoly Dominion Power, or Dominion Energy. It now gives them the ability to raise the rider fees, the taxes and fees and charges that are tacked on to people's energy bills. Dominion Energy can now raise them, and the point of the going is to be able to pay for the nuclear power plants that are basically outdated, that have they're expired, and they're supposed to be, they should be dismantled at this point, but they've been allowed to stay up, and Dominion Energy wants to upgrade them. But the sad part is that those nuclear power plants are on fault lines, where so if there was an earthquake where that would have happened near those fault lines, those nuclear power plants could be hit. So it's like I said, it's those pieces of legislation that incumbent politicians have voted on that have led to that or possibly could lead to adverse effects elsewhere, but they don't really care about that because the majority of politicians throughout the state, especially in the House of Delegates, have accepted money from Dominion Energy,
so correct,
including the opponent.
Yeah. So I think you might have just said that the incumbent has been financed by Dominion Energy.
Over the 8 years she's been in office as a delegate, she has accepted $10,000 total from Dominion Energy.
Gotcha. So in 2016, there were allegations of voter suppression in Virginia. Did you see that, or what's the evidence of that?
Well, personally, I did not see any acts of voter suppression. I mean, there was already stuff in place by that time. Voter ID laws were already passed. Lifetime felon disenfranchisement has been in the Virginia Constitution since the early 1900s. Voter suppression was already in effect here in Virginia, long ago. It's just people became normalized and become used to it, and will even defend some of those forms of oppression. Now, that being said, one of the things that I come to question about the election integrity efforts is that we do use optical scanner machines where you take a paper ballot, you circle in whoever your choices, then you give your ballot to a poll worker, they feed it into an optical scanner machine to have your ballot counted. But the problem with that is that we don't know where those how those machines are calibrated. Are they calibrated to fairly count the votes, or are they being calibrated so that certain votes are miscounted intentionally or tossed out intentionally? Jill Stein correctly pointed out in a tweet a while back that that the United States Civil Rights Commission found that if you lived in a community of color, if you for example, live most of the communities south of the river in my district, then your vote is certain to be thrown out or miscounted for one reason or another. And so, those kind of voter suppression tactics, those are not talked about. We just, focus on the ones that are obvious, but we don't look at the actual. We don't look at the machines, and we don't look. And be honest with you, we don't look at the fact that these parties, the duopoly parties, use their influence over so many of these elections, and the fact that we have unlimited campaign contributions in Virginia, that makes it even worse. Along with the obvious gerrymandering that the General Assembly has engaged in over the years.
Okay, so I see a couple of interesting things in your platform on democracy and voting rights. So you're a proponent for enacting proportional representation. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So I do believe that certain communities are intentionally being underrepresented by the fact that we do not by the fact that we have like one person per district, and it should be multiple sets of people representing certain districts, so that way it's no it's just not one person. It's like multiple people representing the same area, but it's representing different parts of that same area, so that all communities are fairly represented and have their concerns, their grievances redressed at the state level. So I do support proportional representation
to basically eliminate the monopoly of the demographic that exists today.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So I was just emphasizing your point. It's to eliminate the monopoly of the demographic that exists in leadership today, or in representatives today.
Oh yeah. That's the ultimate goal of that.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal behind the proportional representation concept. Is that to diversify the representation, because instead of it just being, for example, just being a majority white, have more people of color in the General Assembly. You could also have more Greens in the General Assembly, or even more Libertarians, or what have you, instead of just Republican and Democrat everywhere.
Right. Right, which Republicans and Democrats are almost the same thing. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, put like this: they are the wings on the same capitalist vulture.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so Jill Stein was for free college tuition in public schools and for eliminating student loan debt. What's your position on education?
Personally, I believe there needs to be universal pre-K. We need to have free child care provided for all parents, because, as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. And how can you expect a child to be able to grow and prosper if the community does not get involved in the raising of that child? Tom Perriello, who ran for governor in the Democrat primary, proposed what he called 14 education, where there's pre-K, and then there's also after you graduate high school, you get 2 free years of vocational or collegiate education behind that. Now, I personally support that, but I believe that we should stretch it a bit further, and provide, like I personally believe college should be free, and vocational training. Those things should be free to everybody, and quite frankly, it should be it should be. They shouldn't have to wait. People should not have to wait until they graduate high school to take those courses. Like they should be able to take them while they're in high school, so they already have a leg up.
Gotcha. Okay, so let me ask you this. You touched on Dominion Power. What are the environmental concerns in Virginia?
We have Virginia is currently under the threat of having 2 pipelines constructed through the state. The Atlantic Coast and Mountain Valley pipelines. I oppose them both. I do not believe that they are necessary. Even Dominion Energy has had a hard time trying to justify them. They're in Buckingham County. The Dominion Energy was able to have the county approve a special use permit to build a compressor station in the county's only black neighborhood, and I was there to speak up against that. I personally support what's known as the Virginia Declaration of Solar Rights. I am the only candidate to have done so, which basically calls for the expansion of solar energy and the lifting of all the restrictions on solar energy generation in Virginia. So, for example, if you wanted to share or lease solar panels with people in your community, that's against the law. The total generation of solar power in the state cannot exceed 1% of the total energy generation throughout the state. And so that is, those are the kinds of environmental concerns that stem from the fact that we have companies like Dominion Energy that have so much influence in our General Assembly that they're basically able to get priority in legislation, except but when it comes to addressing the people's issues, then they don't want to touch that. But I also support a ban on fracking, a ban on natural gas fracking, and I also support continuing any existing moratoriums on offshore oil drilling. I personally believe we need to move to hemp. We need to promote industrial hemp. We have seen how hemp has been used. It's been tested in cars and the internal combustion engines, and it was proven back in the day when it was tested that it was actually better than petroleum. Same with paints and varnishes that DuPont wanted to put out there. The hemp-based paints and varnishes were proven to be better than oil-based paints and varnishes. And this was tested by the federal government. But sadly, the federal government, got bought out by DuPont and all the little or other big oil interests, and so we wind up being dependent on oil for a lot of our needs, like plastics, paint, like I said, paints and varnishes, fuels, those kind of things. And so, for me, part of my environmental campaign is transition from using oil-based fuels and more towards hemp-based fuels or solar power, or whatever resources that we could use that don't require us to have massive tools that drill into the ground and cause earthquakes just trying to obtain barrels of oil. I mean, after all, we have produced so much oil in this country overall that we would never be able to burn all that oil off. We have more than enough oil on, in barrels and what have you than what we need to do with. Like, unless they're trying to fund a little space mission on Mars or something like that to colonize it, there's no need for us to have all that oil on the ground.
Yes, I agree. Let me see. What about human rights? Right now, it's kind of timely, so I'm going to ask you about it. Undocumented workers.
Sure.
What would your platform be regarding undocumented workers?
Well, I personally believe that, well, when it comes to undocumented workers, the main reason why they come here is not necessarily because they want to have a better life. They're fleeing their homeland because of the fact that our foreign policy, the United States foreign policy, has wreaked havoc in their homeland, and as such, they have no other choice but to flee to America to escape the ravage and destruction that we continue to wreak on their homelands. We can't get mad at undocumented workers for coming here when we are still bombing 7 other countries without congressional authorization, and destroying their homes. So they're going to flee to Britain. They're going to flee across the Atlantic to come here to seek refuge because they don't want to bomb themselves. So it's obvious that they're trying to escape our foreign policy. If we didn't cause the economic destabilization to the degree we have, and the political destabilization that we have, more than likely the undocumented workers would not need to come here in the first place. And if they were to come here, they would be able because they've come here on their own terms, and they want to live here in America by choice, not by force. And so ultimately, we need to challenge the United States federal government. We need to challenge Trump. We need and Congress and all the policies that have been enacted in the past by Obama and all the previous presidents that have wreaked havoc on the homelands of the undocumented workers that flee here to seek refuge from our foreign policy.
So I wasn't going to touch on that, but let's talk about foreign policy. What do you think of the wars that we're fighting overseas? Who's responsible for those, and what's the solution going forward?
Well, I would personally say that when it comes to who's responsible, I believe that you have a lot of corporate interests that are vested in the destruction of these homelands, to allow for them to take over, build things, and basically make life difficult for all of humanity. So I believe that there are outside forces that are behind the wars. We already know that the banks have funded both sides of the war since basically the beginning of time. And like I said, it's up to, in order for us to put a stop to these wars, we have to challenge this notion that we have to be the police of the world. We do not need to be the police of the world. We do not need to spend more than 50% of our country's budget in defense programs. We can go ahead and take that money, and I'm in the same camp with Joe Stein on this one. We don't need all those military bases. We can close down those military bases. Yeah, all of them, quite frankly. We can close down Guantanamo Bay. We don't need it. We don't need to have all those. We don't need to keep constructing all these tanks and fighter jets that are basically useless and have and don't work. I know there are some people that are concerned about, well, you got these people that are working in those industries, but why aren't we talking about trying to transition them from a wartime economy into a more people-centric economy, where we're investing in green jobs, repairing our infrastructure, investing in improving mass transit, and those kind of things. We're not focused on those things because, number one, our federal government is obviously vested in white supremacy, and number two, we would rather focus on, blowing up the earth, thanks to those outside forces that have us distracted on making sure that those gosh darn Muslims don't come over here and attack us again. I mean, reality is they don't really care. They just want us. They just want the United States to leave them alone, so they can live a dignified life. That's all they want. They just want to live a dignified life. They don't want to get blown up. So, like I said, we have to challenge our federal government's actions and put a stop to it. And that means, yes, we have to get Greens out there that are willing to challenge these pro-war Democrats and pro-war Republicans, and challenge them in Congress. Challenge them, if we can. Well, we need to challenge them in the presidency as well.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, so what about the LGBTQ community in Virginia? Are they represented by the laws over there, or are they suppressed by the laws over there? And what changes would you make?
Well, in Virginia, we have what is known as the Virginia Human Rights Act, and that's basically Virginia's non-discrimination act. You can't discriminate against a person because of their race, religion, skin color, creed, what have you. But what's not in the Human Rights Act is protections for the LGBTQ community. There have been attempts to add those protections, but Republicans were having the majority in the House, and most of them being pro-life, pro-Christian Republicans. They wind up they vote against those protections every time. So what I want to do is add those protections into the Virginia Human Rights Act, and not only that, I want to make the Virginia Human Rights Act part of the Virginia Constitution. So the protections I want to add specifically are to ensure that nobody is discriminated based on their sexual orientation, their gender identity, or their gender expression.
Excellent. Hey, so you touched a little bit on taking the vote away from convicted felons. That's a lifetime penalty. Can you talk a little bit about your justice reform policy? It looks like you're against schools referring students to law enforcement, and the decriminalization of marijuana, and the decriminalization of sex workers. Go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, and sure thing. And one of the things that when it comes to lifetime felon disenfranchisement, like I said, it's a racially motivated policy, and it was inserted into the Constitution in the early 1900s. It's public record that the people who wanted lifetime felon disenfranchisement, included in the Virginia Constitution, intended to use discrimination instead of race to make it stick, because they know if they were to do it on a racial basis, it would be challenged by the federal government and put in check. So I want to abolish that, because personally I believe that that all people should be able to vote, even if they're incarcerated. Even if you're in jail, you should still be able to vote, because even while you're incarcerated, first, the local governments are able to collect tax dollars, and you're able, and the local government is able to collect those tax dollars, but you're not being able to choose your representation. So basically, it's taxation without representation. And when you look at the fact that there are people in jail that are on work release, that are that are even employed in the jails, producing furniture, working on these prison farms or what have you, or some of these for-profit prisons, you see that like I said, they're obviously they're by them working, they're earning money, they're paying taxes into the system, but they're not getting anything back. And they're not being able to choose their representatives. And I feel that's unfair. So I believe that, like I said, every person, even if they're incarcerated, should be allowed to vote. There is no, if memory serves me correct, federal law only prohibits people from voting if they've been convicted of treason. That's the only offense that should be that should disqualify you from voting, as far as I'm concerned. Now, in terms of decriminalizing marijuana, the General Assembly of recent years has tried to make marijuana a civil offense instead of a criminal offense, where you do jail time. They tried to make it a civil offense where you pay a fine. I personally believe it should be neither. Marijuana has been used for many different purposes. People think, oh, you're just smoking it to get high. That's not the case. People have used it for as a medicinal remedy, as food, to produce paper, to produce clothes, shoes. It's been used to produce a lot of things. And like I said earlier, it's been tested as a fuel source and as a base for paints and varnishes. So we need to be able to utilize those benefits that marijuana can bring to us instead of continuing to criminalize it and throw a lot of people in jail for it. Support fully decriminalizing marijuana, but I also support ordering the governor, if it's constitutionally possible, to have him issue what is known in Virginia as an absolute pardon for every person that was convicted of distribution or possession of marijuana, in addition to instituting a ban to prevent employers from disqualifying potential employees from employment because they test positive for marijuana. And in terms of sex work, yes, in my district there are some corridors that that sex workers frequent. I believe that they should be entitled to the protection of the law. So I will seek decriminalization of that, to where they are not, thrown in jail just because they're arrested, nor are they charged a fine. But I do believe it should be legalized to allow, like I said, to allow for sex workers to have access to legal protections, to also have access, to be able to, to unionize and defend their rights to, fair wages and things like that, the fair pay and stuff.
Yeah, so these things you're talking about basically brings those industries out of the black market and actually reduces crimes, increases tax revenues, and just saves us from putting people in prison for no reason.
Exactly, and when you look at the fact that we have the highest, the United States has the highest rate of incarceration on the planet. We have more incarcerated people than most countries combined. It's obvious that locking up people for petty offenses for profit is not the method that we need to take. We need to start, like I said, we need to start decriminalizing certain actions. And most of the people engage in sex work and engage in the selling of drugs because they have no other options. Especially here in Virginia, they don't have much options. After they exhaust all the avenues that they can to find work so they can support themselves and sustain themselves legally, and they keep getting rejected over and over, they feel that they're pushed up into a corner. And so they're like, okay, well, at this point, after I've exhausted everything, there's nothing else I can do, so I might as well go ahead and sell my body. I might as well go ahead and sell these drugs in some of the poorest neighborhoods. I might as well go ahead and break into these cars and steal things out of them. I might as well get this high paying job where I can be around checks and stuff and I can embezzle money. So what I'm saying? Those kind of crimes stem from the fact that people are trying to survive. There are survival crimes, and like I said, if the environment was more conducive to enable people to sustain their families, we wouldn't have to worry about most of these petty crimes in the first place. And be honest with you, it puts a bad taste in my mouth even calling them petty crimes, because they're not crimes. Those are just actions of human beings that have been, they have exhausted all their options, and they're doing what they have to do to survive. And as a person who has been incarcerated because he committed a theft crime, I admit that yes, that's one of those very reasons, and I come from that, and I understand them, and I'm able to empathize with people who have been there. And given the way this economy is going, I wouldn't, if it were to explode, if thefts and prostitution and drug selling were to explode, we can't blame anybody else but all of society for that, because we didn't do our part to stand up to it, to challenge these employers, discriminate against people and throw them under the bus and lock people out of the economy, so they can't sustain themselves.
So that's a good segue. Do you support the $15 minimum wage movement?
I do, but I personally support raising the minimum wage to $26.80 per hour, which was what it should be today, when you account for increased worker productivity, increased costs of living, that have all went up since the Reagan administration. What I also support is what has been tried in California and in Connecticut. Well, Targets and what happened. If the Walmarts and Targets refuse to pay their workers $26.80 an hour minimum wage, they will be.
Montague, can I ask you to restate what you just recently said, because it sounded like you broke up for a little while.
Oh, okay. Well, and not only do I support raising the minimum wage to $26.80, which would specifically apply to businesses making more than $2 million a year. So businesses like Target and Walmart and McDonald's, Food Line, Kroger, all the big multinational, multi-chain businesses. Not only do I support raising that minimum wage up, but I also support enacting a penalty where those particular businesses will be required to surrender 25% of their profits annually if they refuse to pay their workers $26.80 per hour. And so, and not only that, but I also support abolishing right to work in Virginia. And there are also certain restrictions against strikes. Like, for example, public sector workers cannot strike. Nurses are not allowed to strike under Virginia law. I want to get rid of those prohibitions, because the strike is one of the greatest tools that we have against abuses of power. If they refuse to listen to our demands, we have every right to withhold our labor. And Virginia law basically makes that impossible. And it scares people as an intimidation tactic to basically get people to keep slaving for less. And we shouldn't. And that's not what it should be.
Yeah. So it's funny to me that in states where they outlaw public unions, they don't do it for the police departments, because it's the police departments that are protecting their ability to suppress those movements.
I've noticed that as well. And what I've also noticed is how some of these unions have, also look out for police. And I believe that if any of these unions out here, support any police force, they should be looked at with great suspicion. Yeah. They should be looked at with great suspicion, because obviously, they're not looking out for the interests of the workers that pay dues and support them. That's why I support unions like the Industrial Workers of the World. I was a member, and I served on its general executive board for 2 terms, and I love that union. All my fellow workers, I got much love for them, and I encourage everybody to join that union. Join the Industrial Workers of the World. Help build up that union. Make that one big union strong, because that's one of the only unions that are truly sticking up for the people, and not like the SEIU and what have you that have, whose leaders have pledged to work with Trump. Any union that says let's go ahead and work with Trump, they should be challenged. Straight up off bat, they should be challenged.
Right, right. Okay, so let's cover one more topic and kind of wrap it up. I know that
Sure.
you are a public transit or a transit enthusiast. Can you talk about that? How you got into public transit and how that's one of your interests and advocacy positions?
Sure. Like I grew up taking public transit. Like my grandmother, up until she died in 1997, she would always on Saturdays take me out. We'll just go bus riding all across Charlottesville together. And after her death, I just continued the hobby. It's always been an interest of mine. Like I said, I grew up taking the bus, and up until I was 26 years old, I'm 30 now. Until I was 26 years old, I took nothing but the bus exclusively, except for when somebody offered me a ride or something like that. But other than that, like I exclusively took the bus. And then, like I said, when basically in 2013, sorry, that's when I started riding scooters and mopeds, and I've been riding those for 4 years, mainly out of necessity. So in 2010. Richmond City Council proposed a set of fare increases on the GRTC transit system, which would have raised fares by at least 1/4. And I felt that it was not the right step to take at the time, because at the time they did not have unlimited use passes like what you would see in most of the country, where you could use a pass for a day or a week or a month or something like that. They didn't have those options at that time. And so it was just basically either you paid cash or you used a deductive value card, which is known as the Go card. But at that point, when I saw that it was necessary for me to speak out and defend the people, who were, especially people like myself at the time, who faced more hardship from having to pay a higher bus fare. And since then, I got involved with organizations like the Richmond Transit Riders Union, which then branched off into me joining the Industrial Workers of the World, working with the Virginia Organizing and the Richmond Public Housing Residents Against Mass Evictions, which has been trying to stop the mass eviction of public housing residents here in the city. And so organizations allowed me to recognize my true purpose in the political sphere. And that's basically to stand up, to continue to stand up for people like me, who come from poverty, who have who have lived a life of struggle. And by me having gone through the struggles of incarceration, of living in poverty, of being incarcerated, what have you, and being homeless, surviving domestic violence, those are the issues. Those kinds of struggles are issues that a lot of people in my district have been through, or currently experiencing, and including myself, because I'm literally like one of the poorest candidates running in the Richmond Metro, if not the poorest. And so, like I said, having went through those struggles, I don't want to see anyone else, especially the generations coming up behind us. I don't want to see them go through what I went through. And so I feel like it's my obligation, my human obligation, to stand up for the generations that are going to be coming up behind us, that are inheriting the mess that we are still trying to clean today, and the people that have already come ahead of me, to make sure that those who have who have paid their dues through society throughout their lives will be able to die, be able to enjoy their last days of life with dignity and not go through the hardship that I have.
Excellent. So if you don't mind, I want to just share a little thing. My mother and I used to take public transit when I was like 5, 6, and 7, and I remember carrying groceries home with her and my arms being so tired. You know, it's just one of those things that
Yeah.
I just remember.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that too, especially as an adult. I would make sure that I carry like as many. Like I don't care if I had like 25 bags to carry, I would make sure I carried them all by myself, or you'll have family, because I'd be damned if I make another trip out to the store to get more things. You know,
Exactly.
so I just do everything in one trip. My arms will be tired, but it builds up some muscle in your arms, so it's not like you're not getting the benefit out of it. You know.
There you go. Hey, Montague, so we can wrap it up. Hey, what I want to do is ask you if there's anything else you want to talk about, first of all. Is there anything else you want
Well,
to
Well, I would like to quickly emphasize that I'm not just the only Green Party candidate running in Virginia.
Uh-huh.
You have, I'm running in the 69th district, but you also have Will King, who's running in the 18th district. You also have Marcus Sutphin, who is running in the 59th district. You have Jeff Staples, who is running in the 77th district and has been one of the primary leaders in the fight against the pipelines. And you have Gerald Anderson, who's running in the 80th district. And I would encourage y'all to look up all of us. Look up all of our Facebook pages, our campaign pages. Support us through donations because we need all the help we can get. And like I said, we are literally all we got when in terms of the Greens. We are all we got, and we need all the help we can get. And the more help we can get from y'all out there, the better. In terms of me personally, I do have a CrowdPack page set up for donations, which you can donate to, and you can. I also have a campaign Facebook page, Montague Magruder, for House of Delegates 69th District, and you can go to my website magruder69.com to get up, to find out more about myself and read up on my policy positions. And for those who are running for office or considering running for office, don't be afraid to take a challenge. As I said before, the only dumb question is the one that's not asked. If you're unwilling to take that challenge, then that's basically on you for not stepping up to the plate. Because at this point, given how things are in this country, we have to start stepping up and challenging power at any chance we get. And we must take all opportunities that we have available to directly through elections, through protests, through revolutions, whatever it takes to make it hardcore. And the words of Public Enemy.
Agreed. Excellent. So one silver lining about the Charlotte protests is that I discovered you, and I think you're a great candidate, and I hope people support you. Do you want to repeat your donation page website one more time?
Sure thing. Like I said, it's on CrowdPack, and I chose CrowdPack as my donation page because it was referred to me number one, so I found out about it. But also because of the fact that every dime that you donate to me comes straight to me, and it helps the campaign out. And I've publicly pledged to never accept money from corporations or special interests, political action committees, or any of their front groups. Obviously, as a Green, we don't accept them on principle anyway. But the point is that y'all should be able to have that reassurance, and that the people that you're supporting are not bending over to the interests of corporations and front groups. You should be able to know that your donation is going to count for something and is going to help out candidates like myself and my fellow Greens in Virginia, the greater good throughout Virginia. And so, like I say, I encourage y'all, every Green candidate that's here in Virginia, because we are all we got. We need all the help we can get.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing the interview with me, Montague, and I really wish you luck. I hope you win out there.
Indeed, and I hope I win myself. Like, to me, failure is not an option at this point. My success is the utmost in this race, and so I'm looking to box out my incumbent and make the Democrats actually come to the voters again and earn every last vote that they seek. And no more easy peasy elections, no more easy peasy terms. You will answer to the people at all times, and that's what I pledge to do. If I, regardless if I'm elected or not, I will always be ready to answer to the people. If I wasn't ready to do that, I would not be running in the first place.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Montague, and okay, good luck.
All right, man. You too. You have a good evening.
Okay.
And good luck. Y'all have a good night out there.
Okay, you too.